popular technique is twin needle pin tucks. First thing that we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and make sure that we have 2 threads in position, and we've threaded just like we threaded the first thread, going from the spool to number 1 to number 2 to number 3 down to number 4, getting the thread guide here, and in position I have a 2.0 twin needle. I like skinny or tiny pin tucks, so I usually use a 2.0 or a 1.6. We've made sure that we're still on a straight stitch, so we're still on stitch A, and our stitch length is about 2.5. What we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and take off that standard presser foot, and we're going to use a pin tuck foot. And the great thing about the pin tuck foot, and this is actually the 5 groove pin tuck, there are 5 grooves here. There are tiny little grooves here that will allow the fabric to come up into that tuck, creating, or into that groove, creating little tuck, therefore it's called pin tucks. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to place our fabric underneath our presser foot. And while we're going to do this, we're going to do a little exercise. I found the first time that I created pin tucks, the hardest part for me was that several of them were flat. So what I had to learn was finding the grain of the fabric to determine which direction I'm going to get the best pin tuck. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to sew to the ends of my fabric. Get rid of these threads so I can see what I'm doing. I'm going to sew to the end. Take our needle up, go ahead and pull our fabric out. We're going to go ahead and we're going to clip our threads. It's a really nice looking pin tuck, but that is going one direction. As you can see, I have 2 arrows here, one pointing north and south, one pointing east and west, identifying my grain lines. I've already done the north and south, and now I'm ready to do the east and west to see what kind of pin tuck I'm going to get using that direction. So my fabric's underneath my presser foot, and I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to start to sew to the end. And because we're testing, I'm just going to go ahead and cross over that pin tuck. I'm going to come to the end, needle up, out of the fabric, presser foot, thread tails, and let's take a look at that pin tuck. Now you can see already that that pin tuck is a little bit more raised than the first one. The first one is a little bit flatter, whereas this one has a little bit more of a ridge or a hump. So I know that when I'm creating my pin tucks on my machine, the direction I want to go is across my fabric. So let's start by creating our first pin tuck. So we're going to create our first pin tuck, and we're just going to stitch across the fabric. Come to the end, needle out of the fabric, raise the presser foot, and we're going to go ahead and trim. Now when I start my second pin tuck, what I really like to do is make sure that you get rid of all those threads from that first pin tuck. Now what we're going to do, or how the foot is used, is we're going to take that last pin tuck we have sewn and we're going to place it in that last groove to the right of the center. That actually gives us our spacing for our pin tucks. And keeping that pin tuck aligned in that groove, and that's what I'm watching the whole time, that will ensure that my spacing between my pin tucks is correct. I'm not going to watch the needle because the needle's always going to go up down. I have to make sure that I'm watching where that groove sits on that last pin tuck. And again, I'm coming to the end, needle up. We're going to go ahead and we're going to trim our threads. And you can see there's our first start of our 2 pin tucks and how beautiful that looks. So let's just go ahead and add a third pin tuck so that you can see how we continue to add pin tucks. Again, we're going to place that last pin tuck in that last groove, making sure that it's sitting in that groove and everything's aligned. I'm going to start to stitch, and I'm going to sew to the end. So if you happen to get off on one of these pin tucks when you're stitching, the best option is to take that one out and start over. Otherwise, all of your rows will, or all of your pin tucks from that point on, will be off just ever so slightly. So we're at the end, we're going to trim, and let's take a look at our beautiful pin tucks that we have created, wow, on the Baby Lock Zest using the optional pin tuck foot.